Hello, and welcome to this presentation about Fastenwandern. Fastenwandern is hugely popular in Germany, where it originates from, and every year tens of thousands of people dedicate a year of their time to enhance their well-being through Fastenwandern. That's why we also refer to it as detox, the German style. In this presentation, which is going to be about 45 minutes, we will be looking at what is Fastenwandern and to look in particular at fasting and how it's actually a very natural thing. How do you benefit from fasting? What fasting methods are we using? And how and what will you learn during a typical fasting week? And where can you do Fastenwandern? Fastenwandern is a German word. It consists out of two words. One is fasten or fasting, and then wandern means walking or hiking or trekking, however you refer to walking through the forest in fresh air. Let's have a closer look at fasting now. What exactly is fasting? And our definition of fasting is that it's the voluntary abstention from food and stimulants for a limited period of time. And I think the important word in this definition is voluntary. It's something people deliberately, consciously, and voluntarily do. We differentiate between two types of fasting. There is therapeutic fasting on one side and preventative fasting on the other side. In the therapeutic fasting dimension, you're looking at a more medium-term duration, which can be 10 to 21 days, in some cases even longer. It's a classical naturopathic method, and usually there's a clinical indication for you to get into therapeutic fasting, because you will be taken care of by a specially trained medical doctor, who is also trained to be a fasting physician, and the responsibility of therapeutic fasting lies with your MD, with your physician. Preventative fasting, on the other side, we also refer to it as fasting for healthy people, is usually short-term, 5 to 10 days, where you are looking after your own health. And it's a purely preventative measure, preventing diseases from coming up in the first place. And you're being looked after by a professionally trained fasting coach. And the responsibility lies with you, the faster. If you look at these geese here, these gray geese, they travel every year 6,000 miles without taking any food. So they are real masters of fasting. And this is only one example of the animal kingdom. If you take the empress penguin here, living in the Antarctic, when the female lays the egg and the male then breeds it, the female is going on a 6-month journey looking for food, and that means that the male has no food for 6 months because he cannot leave the egg unattended for more than a few seconds. And here is another extreme example of how the body of the empress penguin is able to sustain such a long period of time without any food whatsoever. If we look at us humans, going back to the time when we were hunters and gatherers, there were often longer periods of time where simply no food was available. So our bodies had to be able to deal with this scarcity or pure absence of food. And whenever this happened, the body had a program, a genetic program, where the metabolism changes from what we call an external metabolism into an internal or fasting metabolism, something I will explain in more detail later. So the body, the human body, has been and still is until the present day very much able to deal with scarcity. The problem happens when we are taking in too much food, when there is an abundance or an excess of food. Then the body has less effective programs to deal with this excess of food. Normally, excess of food is stored in fat, but that is not as good a method as fasting is of dealing with scarcity. So you could actually say that excess destroys health, because the body can't deal with excess as well as it can do with scarcity. Most of the world religions actually have some elements of fasting in their programs. Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Judaism all have elements of fasting of various durations and intensity built into their programs. In Christianity, the Catholics start their fast with Ash Wednesday, and then they get this ash cross made on their forehead, and then they go through the Lent period, which lasts until Easter. If you look at the news, there's a lot of news in the English-speaking media about fasting. Here you have The Guardian talking about how fasting can help protect against brain diseases such as Alzheimer and Parkinson. This is from February of 2012. Then also in February, here's an article about fasting could help combat cancer and boost effectiveness of treatments. So even for serious diseases, cancer is in discussion. BBC, here, can fasting be good for the brain? And another BBC documentary in August 2012 was about intermittent fasting, where you change between eating and fasting on a regular basis, where once a week you would put in a fasting day, for example. Fasting has been made very popular in Germany, mainly through Dr. Otto Buchinger, a physician who developed what is called in German Heilfasten, or therapeutic fasting, and he set up his own fasting clinic and really made fasting very well known within Germany. From the therapeutic fasting, or Heilfasten, the fasting for healthy people has been derived, and this is what we in Urban Healing actually use. That's our fasting method, the one of Otto Buchinger. And the aim of the Buchinger method is to basically achieve a health-focused, sustainable lifestyle. So it's not about just coming on a fast and then everything will be fixed. It's for a more sustainable change towards a health-focused lifestyle. And I've chosen this image here, who is an 86-year-old German gymnast who still competes in competitions. And most people like the idea of getting old. And it's really about the quality of getting older, the quality of life when we're getting older, that matters. And fasting is a great way of maintaining high quality of life and vitality into old age. So now we need to look into, well, why should I actually fast? Why should I do this? And most importantly, won't I feel hungry? Won't I be miserable? Good questions, and many people ask these questions. So let's see what answers we have. First of all, fasting is a holistic method. And holistic means that fasting addresses all elements, all dimensions of us human beings. Most people think about fasting and connect it with the physical dimension, which we come to in a moment. But there's also a spiritual dimension and a social dimension. When people think about the physical dimension of fasting, the first thing that comes to mind is actually losing weight. And yes, you will lose weight when you're fasting, but weight reduction is more like a side effect. This is not the true reason why we're fasting. What really happens when we're fasting is we're getting rid of a lot of toxins that have accumulated over a long period of time in our bodies. These can be metabolites that haven't been excreted yet. These can be heavy metals that have been encapsulated in fat tissue and other cells. And by ridding the body, eliminating these toxins, it actually reduces inflammation. And inflammation is one of the key reasons why a lot of diseases can get hold of us. And inflammation is the reason for joint pain, for arthritis, for many other things. So many people who fast experience that their joint pain reduces very quickly throughout a fasting week. Our digestion takes up a lot of energy. They say between 15 and 30% of a person's daily energy production is used on digestion. During a fast, there is no digestion, or very little, and therefore this energy can now be used to repair and boost your immune system. And any therapy, any treatment that is able to boost your immune system will make you more resilient and strengthen your defense against diseases. Other physical dimensions are enhanced sensing. People experience that they're able to smell, taste, hear, and see much stronger than before the fast. Suddenly, they are aware of how things smell in a much stronger way. The taste of the things that they're taking in is much stronger and much flavorful. The things that they can touch and see and hear, so there's a strong increase in sensitivity towards all the inputs that we experience on a daily basis. Another thing that happens, because we're detoxifying, our skin revitalizes and rejuvenates. And whenever your skin rejuvenates, you can actually see it, because the result is firmer, tighter, and brighter skin. And most people experience more vitality and more energy. So when people say, fasting and walking every day, how can you do this? Interestingly enough, instead of having less energy, they actually have more energy. Much of that has to do with energy not being used for the digestive process. And fasting definitely reduces a number of health risk factors which will enhance your well-being. On the social dimension, we have an increased mental and clarity. We have increased mental clarity and focus. What this means is, because we have heightened sense awareness, we can focus and concentrate much better than we have before. That allows people to reflect on where they are in their life, their relationships, on many issues, and become more aware of where they are and how they fit into their environment. It strengthens creativity, and it also heightens sensitivity towards others' needs. An interesting development during fasting. And very important, it really helps you to break with old habits, particularly when these habits haven't been helpful and your friend. In today's life, with Facebook, mobile phones, emails, Twitter, and all these things around us, it's very hard to really be disconnecting from digital life. And when people come on a fast, we really encourage them to leave all their electronic gadgets behind and let people know in advance, look, I'm going to be gone for a week, and make arrangements that there's no need for them to check emails or look on Facebook pages or anything like this, or read their emails. Because by disconnecting from your digital life, you are able to reconnect with yourself. You experience your body, you experience your breath, you experience your thoughts and your feelings and emotions in a much different way than when you're right in the middle of everyday life. Trusting in your body's abilities gives a lot of people reassurance in how much they can actually accomplish. And I think one of the great recognition that people have is when it's 12 o'clock and normally time for them to have lunch, and they realize, I don't have to eat. I don't have to have lunch. It's 6 o'clock. I don't have to have dinner. And they notice their body works and has more energy and feels better than if they do. And that is a great realization that many people are very surprised about. You're able to look after yourself in a much better way by trusting in your body's abilities and reconnecting with yourself. And that helps you to find new solutions to old issues. On the spiritual dimensions, generally, people are opening up for spiritual experiences. While before this, no, this is not for me, and I just believe what I see, they're actually open to the fact that there is much more than themselves and their immediate environment. And simply connecting with nature and the world around you can be a very eye-opening experience. And to learn that less is more is a great learning for many people. So what actually happens during a fast? All food that we consume contains actually contains glucose or sugar, proteins or fats or lipids. So what happens when we stop giving our bodies food? Obviously, an alarm bell goes on and it says, okay, there's no more solid food. I need to switch from getting my food from the outside to getting my food or my energy from the inside. So we're switching now from an external metabolism into an internal or fasting metabolism. And it really is like a switch. The body behaves differently once that switch has been flicked. So our brain needs a lot of energy, and that energy usually comes from glucose, which is coming from carbohydrates, from sugars, from the food that we eat. When there is no food coming, the glucose storage is depleted within 24 hours. Glucose sits in our muscle tissue as well as in our liver, and it takes exactly 24 hours for that to be emptied. So when these glucose storages are empty, another alarm bell goes on and says, okay, there is no sugar left, alarm, alarm, where am I going to get my energy from? And this is when the body starts to use protein, and it is able to then convert proteins into glucose, or basically into energy. And the proteins here, the body is also very clever in the sequence in which it uses the protein. First, it uses all dangerous, harmful proteins, then excess proteins, and only finally it would go into our muscle tissue, which is also a protein. And of course, we don't want that. And that is one of the reasons why when you are fasting, it's absolutely critical to have a lot of movement, and I will explain you later why. And so for the next 2 to 3 days, most of the energy comes from proteins and very little comes from the fat. And after 3 days, the body then basically switches over, reduces the energy that comes from protein and increases the energy that's being produced from the fat that is stored in our body. And after day 4, basically, the protein consumption for energy production is reduced to a minimum, and then most of the energy comes from burning fats. And that's really what happens when we are fasting. Coming back to why it's important to have a lot of movement, we don't want the body to use our muscle tissue to create energy. And so therefore, if we are moving a lot, we're using our tissue, because unused tissue will be broken down to produce energy. So whatever doesn't get used will be broken down. And if we use our muscles, we have a lot of movement, the body will not use muscle tissue to generate energy. So therefore, movement is absolutely critical. The German Fasting Academy, where I did my education as a medically approved fasting coach, has issued some guidelines of fasting for healthy people. And I'd like to share with you those 12 guidelines. All fasting should really start ideally with a preparation day. From whatever you are eating today, when you start, you have a preparation day, which is a joint experience within the group that you will be spending the next 7 days with. And we give you light, steamed food or raw plant-based food, no meat, no deep-fried food or anything like that. During the fast, you will actually abstain from any solid foods, which means for 5 to 10 days, in our case it's only 5 days, you will not have any solid food, and you should also not take any vitamins, minerals or protein supplements. Very important, during the fasting period, you will abstain from stimulants, and stimulants can be nicotine, alcohol, coffee, drugs, recreational drugs and things like that. And we then start the fast actually with a complete bowel evacuation. We're using Glauber salts, which is also known as sodium sulfate. You take this in the morning and then you will have to go to the toilet quite often. Usually it takes 3 to 4 hours, and then your bowels are completely cleaned out. And the actual provision, what do you get during the fast, according to Dr. Buchner? Lots of water, herbal and fruit teas, a clear vegetable broth, usually in the evening, a diluted fruit or vegetable juice, 1/4 liter, lemon wedges, and if needed, you can also get a teaspoon of honey. So if people need more energy, then you can get this from the sugar contained in the honey. Important is that we stay below 500 calories a day, because then we stay in the fasting metabolism. We said lots of water. It actually means you should have at least 2 to 3 liters of liquid per day. If we do the fast in a hot climate, then it can be even more. And so water should be spring water, and herbal teas, no green or black teas. And whatever we take, it mustn't have any calories. Daily movement in fresh air, we know now why this is so important, but another thing that is important, that we're alternating our movement with rest and with relaxation. So movement is great, but we also need to give our body rest, and there's plenty of opportunity during fasting week. To support your elimination and your purification process, colonic irrigation will actually really help you. And we recommend that during the fasting days, you have an enema at least every second day. And we will show you also how to do this. And that's why it's important that people have their own bathroom during a fast. Other things you can do to support detoxification is, for example, brushing. We show you how you can brush your body to move, to stimulate your lymph flow, which again helps you to eliminate toxins. Water treatments such as Kneipp cure, the mixture of hot and cold water, and a liver compress. We show you how to make a liver compress. When we come back from our walking, then that's something you can apply for half an hour while you rest. Massages. The locations where we offer Fastenwandern also has massage services available, and it's a great thing to have a nice massage when you come back from your walk. Infrared sauna, great way of getting toxins out of your body, and daily fasting talks for the mental detoxification really helps to share your experience and see how other people have spent their day. On the 5th day, we are breaking the fast with an apple meditation. And you may think, wow, an apple, that doesn't sound like a lot of food. Interestingly enough, most people they aren't even able to finish the apple because they're full after half an apple. And we invite people to decorate their table with things they find during our walks, leaves, flowers, sticks, whatever, branches, and to make breaking the fast a really special event where they consciously take solid food into their bodies again. Very, very important after the fast has been broken is that the reintroduction of food is done in a very gentle, very controlled way. And we say that you should build up towards, normal food intake for at least 3 days or a third of the fasting period. And during this period, you have very light food. You have steamed food, some raw food, soups. So nothing heavy on the body, because it's very important that you give it enough time to get used to being fed again. And what is important is what happens after the fast. And many people use the opportunity of having a fasting week as a change into a more sustainable, into a more healthy nutrition. And we introduce a whole food diet. There's a formula which is developed by a German university in Gießen, which we introduced to you. And this could be one of the alternative ways of having a healthier diet in your life. So this was all about the fasting part in the word Fastenwandern. Let's now move towards the walking part. And what does actually a typical day look like? Every day we start with a morning exercise at 7:30 and we go outside if the weather allows. And then we have our morning tea. This is during the fasting days. We have a class where you learn more about things that are important to know about fasting and what happens after. And I will say more about this shortly. And then we go out and have our walks. During the walks we have juice breaks and lots of other breaks and water. Then we come back for rest and relaxation, and that's also a good time to do your liver compress. And of course you can do water treatments, you can have a massage, because at 6 o'clock we are meeting again for our fasting broth. Then an hour later we meet to review the day, to share our experience in a nice comfortable setting where everybody can share the experience. And we close the day with relaxation activities, because by 9 o'clock most people are really ready to go to bed. So this is what a typical day looks like in a Fastenwandern week. Here you can see some images of groups we've had, and how they take their soups and their teas. And in the background you can see all these thermoflasks with hot water, so people can go in and make their teas whenever they want one. In terms of walking, we're walking 3 to 4 hours every day, which is 10 to 12 kilometers. And we start easy and then we increase the intensity of our walks as the week progresses. There will be plenty of breaks, and we serve water and juice, which everybody carries in their backpacks. Very important during the fasting is that we have actually a lot of fun. And we do games, we do activities, and when you do this together as a group, that's a very, very strong motivation, and a very strong bonding takes place, because we're all in the same boat. We all are here because we want to fast and experience how this affects our bodies in a very positive way, in our mind. And so creating fun is something we emphasize a lot on, so that you can actually laugh and enjoy your period there of fasting. So I mentioned the wellness class. What will you actually learn in the wellness class? Well, it's a good idea to understand how your digestive system actually works, because most people have some idea but aren't really sure. So we really go through this in detail. We look at ways and how you can support your detoxification during the fast. I mentioned some of them already. And then we look into the food that we eat. We look at the different food groups. How do they get absorbed into our body? What works well with each other? What do I need to be aware of when I consume these food groups? And then we introduce alternative nutrition styles with a focus on whole meal nutrition. We learn movement and relaxation techniques, and how to break the fast and the building up days. And most importantly, in my opinion, is not so much what happens during the fast, but what happens when you come home. So here we're going through useful tips for everyday life after the fast, so that you can sustain your new lifestyle back at home. When you are fasting for the first time, there are a few things you may want to consider before making a decision. Do you want to do fasting at home on your own, or do you want to fast during vacation, maybe in a group? And do you want to do therapeutic fasting, or do you want to go into a fasting clinic? And when I say therapeutic fasting, I mentioned earlier, usually has a clinical indication. If you have an existing condition where you're required to take strong medication, then it's probably that you will benefit more from going through a therapeutic fasting setting than going into a fasting for healthy people setting. Other things you may want to look at is, how are you feeling at the moment? Do you feel healthy and capable? Because fasting for healthy people requires you to be physically able to go through this experience. And you need to look into the drugs you're currently taking. If, for example, you take a blood thinning medication, and fasting thins your blood automatically already, then I, as your fasting coach, I'm not in a position to give you advice on what you should do with your medication, as I'm not a medical doctor. So you see, this is why it's important to know about these things before you come on a Fasting for Healthy People event. And of course, will you be able to stay away from your stimulants, your cigarettes, your coffee, and your alcohol, or any drugs you may be taking? Good. So that was a rough overview of what the Fastenwandern was all about. You can get more information on these websites in English or in German, and of course on our own website, urbanhealing.net/Fastenwandern. And thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this presentation. And if you have any questions, please visit us on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, or give us a call on the number that you can see here on the screen. Thank you very much once again, and we look forward to hearing from you. All the best.